What's up, guys? We're about to go outside, but I wanted to talk about this little thing here. I showed this plant hanger that Maya made in a video recently, and I had so many comments about it. And I'm gonna ask him to share some instructions, right? And it is gonna be according to what space you have. But this plant hanger, it's made of the same metal piping that our shelves are made of, and it's just from the plumbing section at like Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you get it cut to the sizes. And we use this stuff for a lot, for shelves, for curtain rods. That's what this is. And you see, you can get bending corners. You can get small pieces to attach to the wall. And all he did here was measure and use that piping to make this. And of course, this little faux beam thing was already in the house. Our house is coming together. It's feeling like home, which is really nice. So today, my house smells amazing. I wish that you guys could smell it, because I have a crock pot full of pear butter. You can see here. I usually make things like apple butter and pear butter in the crock pot, and really it's just a logistics thing. It's hard for me to balance having to cook meals regularly for a big family. It is hard to balance doing other projects that require time in the kitchen, and obviously preserving. Like, you kind of just get into the groove of it during certain times of year, but I'm a little rusty right now because I have not been preserving this summer at all. The cats are fussing at each other. But I end up a lot of times peeling stuff in the evening, and the crock pot recipes are nice because you can cook them overnight and then deal with them the next morning. And I'll type out what I did here in the description down below. And you can it in a water bath canner. And I may end up doing this, but this isn't a whole lot. This is probably just a couple of quarts, maybe like 3. That's a 6-quart crock pot, and it's cooked down to be about halfway full. I think we could probably get through that fast enough. I don't know, like, that's another thing. If it's the first time I make something during a season, I don't even bother canning it, because like my kids are like, oh, pear butter, we haven't had this in a while. And so they eat a lot of it. Now the second round, the third round, those are gonna need to be canned because they're not gonna eat it nearly as fast, because at that point it's not new anymore. It's the same thing with like salsa, anything like that that is really seasonal that my family's used to having. They tear through it at the beginning and then really slow down. Hey, Jamie. All right, let's run off the front door. Oh, Maya has moved. I looked at her a second ago and he was in the hammock. I mentioned the other day that I felt like my soil was nitrogen deficient. I did go ahead and order a little home soil test. It hasn't come in yet, but I put some worm castings down and just watered them in, and I feel like these plants have already gotten a little greener. So here are all my plants I got from Matthew. The butterfly bush is still a little shocky. I've been watering them really good. Like, the hydrangea's doing fine, and the lavender looks great. The only thing we're waiting on right now here in our front flower beds is we're gonna do like a border of pavers so that we can make it a little deeper and divert water from the front of our house. So it's basically we're just trying to do this with longevity in mind. I had originally thought about maybe just putting some soil down and some sort of edging and just doing like a really basic in-ground flower bed, but I think we're gonna build it up a little bit because the house sits kind of on an incline, and it'll protect the foundation to have something in front of it diverting water away, which means we have more materials to bring in, which means it's on the list, and the list is long. And truly, it keeps getting longer because I keep doing things like buying stuff like these bulbs. I was in the Costco the other day, which we didn't have Costco in Arkansas. They actually opened one like the month that I moved. And they had these bags of bulbs, which Matthew had told me it was a great place to buy bulbs. These were $15, $16 for 30 of the mammoth bulbs, which I went online to multiple different places that sell flower bulbs and just did some reading. And you will find sometimes when you're searching for like daffodils is what these are, and I also got some narcissus. You'll find like discount bulbs, but when you go read in like the fine print or the explanation, a lot of times they're bulbs that only bloom with one flower, and the bulbs that cost more are the ones that produce 2 to 3 flowers each when it comes to like daffodils. Found these and it's 30 bulbs, but it says produces up to 85 flowers. So I felt like this was a pretty good deal comparatively to like what I was seeing online. And I bought 2 of these narcissus packs and 2 of the daffodil packs. Eventually I would like to have a lot of daffodils. Like, that's a kind of symbolic flower to me. It's kind of special to me, and I would love to like line the driveway in or something like that with lots of daffodils and narcissus. But I only bought those 4 bags for this year because, one, I'm not trying to spend like several $100s on daffodil bulbs right now. 2, I'm not trying to spend days planting daffodil bulbs right now either. I'm gonna use a bulb auger and I'll show you guys when I do it, but I think that I'm gonna do a line on this side of the fence. I'd originally planned on putting like my asparagus here and decided to change that and integrate that into the garden belt for irrigation purposes. The thing with daffodils is they're so beautiful in the spring, but then, you know, they're done blooming and eventually you end up cutting them back. They die back if you don't. And my thought was, if I did them along, I'm not going to do them right on the fence line because there will be goats on the other side, and goats just love to eat what's on the other side of the fence, and they will damage the fence trying to get to it if you put something too tasty and enticing there. So I'm going to push it off a little bit, but my thought was those will be nice and blooming, and then once they're dying back, it'll be time that we'll be mowing this really regularly. Hey, guess what? We got 6 eggs yesterday. We're back in the egg business. Hey girls. Hey ladies. You'll notice we made a little addition to the maternity ward, which is an electric wire across the top. Oh my gosh, Clementine just shook her muddy self right next to me and flung mud everywhere. So we went around the maternity ward with hog panels. Now, hog panels and cattle panels are different. Hog panels are not as wide. They're 3 feet instead of 4 feet. And also the squares around the bottom are smaller. And we had a lot of people ask if we were concerned that the baby pigs were going to get through. But if you'll look at these bottom openings, they're just like maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches. They're really small. So I'm not worried about baby pigs getting through, and that is why we don't run the electric wire around the bottom, which on other fencing, when we run a wire for hogs, we do run it around the bottom because your concern is that they'll go under and pick it up with their snout. I'm not super concerned about that in the maternity ward, but Clementine did managed to go over one of these panels after we put her in and we were chasing her around the other day in that video. How she managed to get that big old pregnant body over the top of a panel, I really don't know, but it resulted in about 3 hours of pig chasing where Clementine ended up off our property. And that's not great. So we now have an electric wire across the top. Jeremiah, they had started to dig a wallow and he came in and dug it out more and filled it up with water to make sure that they had a space to get into, because basically she went over the top because she had lived the pond life and she just wasn't going back. Now they are happy and she has not tested this fence again now that she has a muddy spot to lay herself in. And I feel her, you know, I mean, I remember what it's like to be massively pregnant. Comfort is key. She's looking really swollen though, and you know, she could have her babies at any point now. It's hard to say. I always guess wrong. I'm always too like, oh, whether it's gonna be any day, and then end up waiting another week or two. But I would rather err on this side. Like, I would rather guess too early than too late and be surprised by babies, you know? So I told you guys I was going to be starting a permaculture design course. I started it this week. It's through Oregon State University, and so it's an online course. Obviously, it's on the other side of the country for me. And we're just like diving into the beginning principles of permaculture. But it's really interesting, and it is a very in-depth course. Like, it's going to be a pretty significant time commitment over the course of the next several weeks. And I knew that. I was informed that on the front end. I like read reviews about the course, and I wanted something that was going to be thorough. But it's pretty cool. Like, I'm kind of curious to see how many of my plans will change between now and finishing this course. It's why I went ahead and jumped on to starting it now. And, you know, on one hand, I'm prepared for it to change my plans. On the other hand, it's validating because I really am seeing and learning some different language for things that we were already applying. And I mean, some of it is just common sense stuff. Like, for instance, if you're gonna plant vegetable gardens, you want to put those zones right by your house because, you know, you basically want to center the things that need to be visited more frequently around the center for human interaction. And I mean, that's common sense. I've been telling you guys for years, don't put your vegetable garden all the way in the back corner of your property because it will be out of sight and out of mind and you will completely neglect it. Put it right there where you got to look at it every day and where it's easy to access. So stuff like that is really cool because it kind of gives me the permaculture language around these common sense things that we've already applied, but also there are other things that I think I'm going to be revisiting how we lay out our fruit trees and some different things like that to bring in as much diversity as possible, which is obviously a great benefit. And I'm excited to show all this stuff to you guys. We burned a massive bonfire the other day of the old wooden posts and different things like that that we took down out here, as well as just a lot of the like boxes and stuff from moving that we weren't able to use in the garden. It really opens this space up. It's still smoldering. It's been smoldering since Sunday. We wanted to burn that when we knew we weren't going to be getting a lot of rain, but after we had gotten a lot of rain, so it wasn't super dry, so it'd be safe to burn, and also when we knew we were going to be home all week, because obviously if we weren't, we would have had to cover that up. I know it's hard to get a grip of these spaces. I think the driveway really helps. You can see we've got the chickshaw down there in the chicken yard, which will be moved. And then we have here these two large silage tarps, and these are 40 by 50. They're covering 2,000 square feet each. From the driveway to the fence is about 80 feet. And it maintains that distance all the way around this driveway. Now here, you can see these little pink flags, and that is where our window greenhouse is going to be, kind of in the middle of this garden belt. And right now I put these silage tarps down to start preparing these spaces for planting, but we wanted to leave access to be able to build the window greenhouse. And over here in this area is actually going to be like a raised bed garden to the side of the window greenhouse. And today I am planning on pulling back a portion of the silage tarp to get prepared. I'm going to be putting in, I have several cabbage starts, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in the ground. Now this ground is not as prepared as I would like it to be, but I'll mulch it heavily. And worst case scenario, the grass grows back and I have to deal with it again in the spring, which I'm very prepared for that. But by going ahead and planting something now, it might get a little bit weedy, but I feel pretty confident that I can get a harvest of my cabbages and stuff this fall, especially if I mulch it well enough. And then, though I might be starting fresh in the spring, battling the grass, that's okay. I mean, I only have these two silage tarps, so I'm gonna pull it back now, but I really just am gonna scooch it down. And I'll use these to kill the grass somewhere, even if it's not right here. So I received a tip never to open these things towards you because snakes can be hiding underneath them. So I'm going to get on top of it and pull it back this way. And if there's a snake, oh, I can hear me scream. Oh man, it's not quite a bit of grass growing under here. I really just don't think that it has been hot enough to properly deal with this grass under here. I might need to rethink this. But in the meantime, have you ever heard an alpaca scuffle? Hey girls! Break it up. You heard me? We're about to have an affirmation circle if you don't stop it. When my kids won't stop fighting, we have affirmation circles. Like if they're being really nasty to each other and tearing each other down, we'll sit down and talk about the things we love about each other and the good things about each other. And I always have to start because I'm the one that's not mad when they're mad. And it's funny. The alpacas don't do affirmation circles, they just spit at each other. You should know if you are one of those people that's like dreaming of one day having a farm but you don't have one yet. There's this like joy that no one really talks about when you get a farm, and that's narrating the personal lives of all your animals. I do it all the time. It's very entertaining. When the camera's not rolling, I'm a little less abashed about it, and I will come out and just like completely narrate their lives, like just like conversations between the animals. Amongst myself, I'm just like, you know, making up these entire dramas. Like Sweetheart and Marley here were having their little scuffle in the barn, and I could come up with a whole story about what was going on there. And really it was probably like she ate the last bite of feed or got in her personal space bubble, or one of them is cycling and they get really touchy whenever they're in heat. So it's probably something like that, but I'll make it about something way more dramatic. And I used to think that was a weird thing that I did, and then I've since learned that that's pretty common for people with animals to just narrate their lives. So about the grass under the silage tarps. I think trying to plant in that, I may still do a section of it. That grass is definitely going to be a problem. But I was prepared for this to be a booger to get rid of because it's Bermuda grass. Even the silage tarps alone, it might not be enough to kill it off, especially not without it being the heat of summer. So I'm going to do some reading and researching. I might need to do like layers of cardboard for months, and then just plant, like dig into that and plant in it while leaving layers of cardboard down. It might not be enough to just cover it for, you know, a handful of weeks and then pull it back. In the past, I have done the cardboard thing. I've done cardboard and then layered compost up on top of it, planted into that, and then continued layering over time. This is my first time really using silage tarps in this manner. I've used them before to like kind of keep prepared spaces prepared, but to go from a completely raw space and develop it, I've never used it. So this is kind of experimental. I may pull back a section and just plant in this grassy soil and mulch it, because I have all these starts. I got to do something with them. If I don't plant them here, I don't really have a place to put them. But that I just uncovered with that much grass poking through, that's not gonna work. There's no way. Bermuda grass, which this is not entirely Bermuda grass, but there is Bermuda grass in this, and it is just, it's ferocious. It is a ferocious grass. The other option, of course, is tilling, which I'm not entirely opposed to tilling to prepare a space which you intend to stop digging. So like tilling, that's the fastest way to get a space started, and then you can continue to do no dig by layering and stuff. But I find it just makes weeds so much worse to like start the process of tillings. And I think that by layering compost and cardboard and doing silage tarps and then using different barriers like cardboard or contractor's paper, I think that I can avoid that. But I don't know, guys, this is an experiment. We're learning together. And truly, like, I know a lot about gardening, but I am so not an expert at all, and especially not on this scale. There are so many things right now that you guys are gonna just have to bumble through with me. I appreciate your input on things. But you know, I really want this farm and this garden to be a classroom, not just for me, but as I make content here, I want it to continue to be a classroom for other people. And I really started that on our old farm, having different methods and doing different things to kind of show how they work. But I'd like to do that even better here. I mentioned this area being a raised garden bed area. There's going to be a path that goes back to where that gate is, and the barn will be back on that other side of the gate. And on the right side of this, leading up to the cut flower area around the window greenhouse, I'm planning on doing like a really beautiful artistic raised garden bed kind of potager space. of course, like, we're interacting with people from all over the place and all different ideologies about gardening and all different like ways of life and opinions about how things should be done, and I get this amazing melting pot of feedback, which I love. And sometimes I'll explain stuff like this, like, I want you to understand where it is that I'm coming from and understand what our goals are here. Because for people who are watching and trying to say, I want to do the most permaculture methods, I want to do, you know, the most sustainable ways of doing things, I want to grow all my family's food with the smallest footprint, you know, we're going to do some things that are like that, because ultimately that is my goal too. I want to do things as sustainably as possible. I want to do things in a way that's regenerative. I want to make the earth better. But then there's this other thing too. I love the garden, and I want to introduce as many people to the garden as possible. So like in permaculture, gardening in the ground it's a more regenerative way of doing it versus something like raised beds. So for people who are like real purists on like making the least impact, they would never buy like a raised bed kit. However, there are a lot of people who are trying to grow all their family's food with the smallest footprint. They're just open to the idea of maybe like gardening some in their backyard. I will always defend that there's value in that. And so you're going to see things like raised beds, and you're going to see different test gardens. And like with the raised bed space, that is an artistic expression of worship for me. So I'm always going to do something like that. And I don't know, I was talking to a friend about it the other day. I don't want to go so far into the regenerative place that I dismiss that there's a place for the 4x8 raised garden bed and the backyard garden, because truly I've considered before, whenever I think about like some of my personal largest videos, like how to grow great tomatoes, that's like one of the most popular videos I've ever made, and I think about how many plastic bags at the grocery store that tomatoes go in. How many of those were not sold because of that video? One of the other biggest videos we have is how to grow salad greens in a soil bag. And a lot of people are like, this isn't sustainable. This isn't regenerative. This isn't, you know, this is a plastic tote. This is a plastic bag. This is, and pointing out that that's not great. But how many clamshells of salad greens were not shipped across the country in big boxes and then purchased and then put in another plastic bag with fossil fuel used to get them to the packaging center, to the grocery store, to an individual's house, and then those clamshells thrown away in the bags that came in thrown away? How many of those were not used? And how much of that circle was closed because of that video? And how many people grew those tomatoes and then they grew those salad greens and they just caught a passion for growing altogether, and then they led to a handful of raised garden beds. They led to growing a large garden in the ground. They led to them wanting to buy, you know, 5 acres out in the country and offset their family's food. For me, I know that I am like the eternal optimist and the romantic about so many things, but like I am always going to make way for any kind of gardening on my farm and trying all the different things, because what I want is all of the gateways that's gonna make somebody go, I think I could do that. Like if gardening is this amazing clubhouse and growing food is this amazing empowering way of life that I've found so much joy in, I want to find all the entry points that are going to bring people into that place, and I want to just make all those entry points. And so a lot of times when you see our garden, if you have an opportunity to build an 80 by 800 square foot garden, you know, this massive space, this might not be the most feasible way for you to do it. It might not make the most sense for you to do it. In fact, if we were just growing with the camera off, I might do things a little bit differently. I don't know, I might not. I like a little variety in my life. The reason why I'm doing it this way, why I'm making space for in-ground, for cut flowers, for high tunnels, for diverse plantings of trees and berry bushes and raised beds and growing something lovely and roses and hydrangeas and daffodils and all of that stuff, is because I love the garden and all the aspects of it, and I want to make as many places at the table for people to find a place there and to find themselves in gardening. Well, I didn't mean to go off on that little topic, but I do love to talk about it. So one of my oldest friends and his family, his wife and children, are coming to spend a couple of days with us this weekend because they wanted to come out and kind of see our place on the front end of what we want to do with it. And just really sweet that they're coming. And I'm so excited to welcome them into a house that smells like delicious pear butter because it smells so good. I have found myself countless times wishing that there was a feature on YouTube that I could just waft a little bit of what I'm smelling to you guys, or give you a little taste of something, or really capture the beauty of something. I feel so limited in the technology that we have. But I do want to thank you guys. I will be a broken record on it. I am so appreciative of you guys being on this journey with us. And I know that I do wax a little poetic when it comes to the garden and talking about empowering and inspiring people to go back to the garden. But at this point, I mean, I felt this way 4 or 5 years ago. I felt this way before anybody ever watched any of those videos that I'm referencing. And so now that I can see where it's worked, I mean, it emboldens me to dream in just a really big way, being like, well, of course it's possible. Of course we can teach people that this is important. So thank you for being a part of that. I bless you. Until next time.